In the heart of Lagos is a local government called Ikorodu. From Ikorodu emerged a man named Edward Adedamola. He was a successful politician and realtor, a very rich one at that. He had investments all over the world. He was well known and respected in his country. He moved with escorts to any place he wanted to be. Mr. Edward Adedamola was so generous that he helped anyone he came in contact with, including his entire community members and family members, both immediate and far relatives. He was so lucky in life that he had all he wanted, except a happy home. At 42, Mr. Edward had been through a painful divorce that almost cost his life. His ex-wife, Michelle, had 4 children, which she claimed were his, not until he had a DNA secretly done on them. He then found out they were not his, but his best friend's children. This made him to cut all ties with James, his best friend, as he was left heartbroken. His wife mocked him and said she only did him a favor to save him from the shame of being an impotent man. This made him more devastated because Michelle was someone he trained in school, helped all her family members, and even established a very lucrative business for her. But in the end of a 12 years marriage, this was how she paid him back. Mr. Edward focused more on his business since he thought he was an impotent man and would never find true love again. One day, Mr. Edward was depressed. He decided to take a ride to the bar next to his estate, which he obviously drank to stupor there. On coming back, he was drunk and drove on a high speed. That he had a terrible accident in a very serene environment of the estate. In this part of the estate, no one lived there, so no one was there to help him, as it was already past midnight. Annabel, a nurse who cared for an elderly woman in the estate, was going home when she suddenly heard a sound. She then ran towards that place and saw that Mr. Edward had run into a tree in his G-Wagon. He was unconscious and could not move. Confused Annabel rushed and dragged him out of the car and immediately called the security personnel in the estate to come and assist her since she could not do much. In an ambulance, he was rushed to a nearby hospital. While Annabel was helping the security personnel to put Mr. Edward in the ambulance, something strange happened. Annabel's wristwatch, or rather wrist chain, got stuck to Mr. Edward's wristwatch. She tried to remove it, but it wasn't coming out. Out of fear and to avoid people thinking she was trying to steal Mr. Edward's watch, she had to stop. His watch was an expensive one. It was made up of pure gold. So she quickly left them and went away. Annabel was from an average home. Her mom was a trader. She sold foodstuff in the market. Her dad was a mechanic. When Mr. Edward woke up the next day, he saw Annabel's wrist chain on his watch. He wondered how it got stuck to him, but he decided to keep it. Dr. Sam, who was in charge of Mr. Edward's case, came to his ward to tell him that one of his legs had been fractured and would need to use crutches for a while before he can walk again. Mr. Edward was sad, but there was nothing he could do. Annabel had resumed for her morning shift. When the head matron called all the nurses, and she chose Annabel as the nurse that would be assigned to help Mr. Edward in his house. Annabel accepted, but she didn't know it was Mr. Edward that was the patient she would look after. She had no idea that Mr. Edward was brought to the same hospital that she worked in. When she got to his ward, the room he was admitted to, she saw him and she was very shocked. Mr. Edward then saw her and said, "Hello, why are you staring at me there? Have you seen a ghost? Come and help me. Help me get up. I need to use the restroom." She immediately went to help him out. As usual, his entourage of cars came to pick him from the hospital since he was discharged that day. Annabel was told to follow them, but Annabel was shy because she had never entered such expensive cars. With this kind of convoy, no, this was the first time she would be entering such cars. When they got to Mr. Edward's mansion, he said to her, "Follow Mr. Chihu. He will show you your room." Annabel knew he was still getting used to his clutches and would need help, so she didn't want to go immediately. Then Mr. Edward said again, "I said you should follow Mr. Chihu and go." Annabel said, "Okay," in a cool manner. As she turned, Mr. Edward fell on the ground. Then she quickly rushed to him and said, "Why are you telling me to go? I am supposed to be with you all the time. You know you are not yet strong to be using these clutches without any help." Mr. Edward now said, "I don't need your help, self-pity or anything. I will manage myself." He then pushed her and stood up with the clutches. Again, he fell. Then he said to her, "I can't do this. I just can't. What is life doing to me?" Annabel now said to him, "You will be fine. I am here to help you." She helped him up to his room while his hands were wrapped on her shoulders. All this happened. Mr. Edward was always holding Annabel's wrist chain. He believed he would find whoever owned the chain and finally thank the person. He also believed it was the owner that saved him that night. Annabel became very close to Mr. Edward. She would cook for him, help him with his laundry, give him his medications, and tell him some funny stories that made him laugh all the time. Anywhere Annabel would go, she was escorted by many security personnel. Mr. Edward started falling in love with her, but he was scared to express how he felt since he did not expect that he would ever find love again. His legs started becoming stronger and he started walking better. One day, Mr. Edward was preparing to go for work. He was dressed up in his room. Annabel immediately bashed in. She didn't know he would be able to get up and do something without her assisting him. So when she opened the door, she saw him in his pants. She was shy. She quickly closed the door. She then said, "I'm very sorry, sir. I'm very sorry, sir. I didn't mean to do that." "No, I didn't mean to." Mr. Edward leaned towards her since he could not walk very well. He then opened back the door and said, "Annabel, it's nothing. I'm getting better. Come in. I decided to do things myself today." Annabel was still shy, seeing him like that. So she ran out again. Mr. Edward laughed afterwards and said, "She's shy again." Since Mr. Edward was getting stronger, he decided to throw a Thanksgiving party in his mansion. He invited all his rich friends, I mean, both home and abroad, to come celebrate with him. On the day of the party, Lady Mitchell, Mr. Edward's ex-wife, came with her clique of friends, uninvited, to attend the party. On sighting her, Mr. Edward stood up. Angrily, he went towards her and said, "What have you come here to do?" She replied, "I only came to celebrate with you. Are you not happy to see me?" He angrily told her that her presence was not needed and she should find her way out. Lady Mitchell now threatened him with the fact that if he forces her out, she would ruin his party by announcing to everyone that he was an impotent man. Mr. Edward was weak. He immediately left her alone. Annabel came towards him and said, "Sir, are you all right?" He replied, "I am fine. Just go and get something for yourself." Annabel knew something was wrong. She quietly left. When Lady Mitchell saw how Annabel was close to Mr. Edward during the party, she got annoyed and decided that she would ruin the party by all means. After all, that was her mission. She brought out the substance she came with and spiked a drink. She gave it to the waitress to give Mr. Edward. The plan was to make him act abnormal and embarrass himself. Few minutes later, the congregation sang a happy birthday song to Mr. Edward. Everyone had said all their wishes individually to Mr. Edward. It was now Annabel's turn to talk. She came to the stage and stood beside him. She then started saying all the good things Mr. Edward had done for her and how he was a blessing to her life, and also how lucky she felt to have him around her, since he was a kind man, a humble man, a generous man, which is a quality you barely find in most rich men, especially politicians. As soon as she finished her emotional speech, she was applauded by the congregation. She then stepped down. While she was going, she noticed Mr. Edward was feeling dizzy. She rushed back, dragged him out of the stage, and said, "Sir, are you okay?" He told her that he didn't know what was wrong with him. He said he felt a little strange. She held his hands and took him to his room. She gave him a glass of water to drink and went to his bathroom to get his towel and a bowl of water so that she can give him a tepid sponge. After all, his temperature was high. Immediately Annabel came out. She saw Mr. Edward standing naked. He was without clothes. She was scared. She didn't know if she should turn back, or rather, he removed them because he was uncomfortable. Confused Annabel came closer. As she came closer, he also drew closer to her. Then they got very close to each other. Mr. Edward started kissing Annabel.